several years, we used to give this course in ergonomics several years ago. And it was subsumed by the sealant program, and it never really came off. And so we finally got it its own place into the curriculum. So several years ago, in the 60s, as a matter of fact, there was a move to improve the efficiency of dentists by training dental students to utilize auxiliaries at chairside. And the program was affectionately known as the four-handed dentistry program. And so the federal government, through the United States Public Health Service, at that time Kennedy was president, and but the Public Health Service essentially funded the program. Now the funding went to people who wrote grants, and the funding went to pay for auxiliary personnel. Dental assistants. Anybody here a dental assistant? So we submitted a grant. Actually had federal grants for several years. We paid for their salaries, and dental students, third-year dental students, and fourth-year dental students had a rotation in the clinic, whereby the auxiliaries would work in a bay for about a week. So the dental students had the ability to have a dental assistant, chairside dental assistant, for a full week. Well, after a while, federal government usually takes the program away, and if you want to do it, then the school has to sustain it. Well, that really didn't happen. The program, the clinical program went away. Probably the most important part of the program went away. And so I retained the course for a period of time, all ergonomics, essentially to familiarize yourself with your work environment. That's what the definition of ergonomics is all about. People in relation to their work environment. So, see, I used the right term. It's very easy to get trapped with this type of program. Dentists in the past were he's, and auxiliaries were she's, and so I got a little pushback from the junior class about that. So I'll try to be good about that. So, and then that program carried through to the senior year too. So the students had 2 weeks of dental assistance, and if they didn't have a patient, the dental assistants could go anywhere in the clinic. So what was that all about? It was about efficiency. I mean, the reason why you're in dental school is to learn to be effective, learn the, some basic routine to provide care that's effective. Effective means essentially doing the right thing, whether it's perio or endo or crown and bridge, implants, having one set way to go. So that's being effective. Being efficient essentially means doing things right. So, in other words, that more emulates the word efficiency. And so, it's hard to develop a lot of efficiency, really, when you're in dental school, because you don't have all the things that you really need. You don't have, for example, a chair-side assistant, so it can't be too efficient. You can to a certain extent, and that depends on the ingenuity of an individual, So that's the difference between being effective, doing the right thing, and doing things right, being efficient. So that's what this is all about. I'm speaking with Dr. Landers because a lot of dentists develop serious back problems, neck problems, lower back problems. And it's because they adapt to the work environment and they're not doing things efficiently enough to prevent those things from happening. Recently did a survey of the junior class, asking them what bothers them in regards to their anatomical, musculoskeletal relationship of doing dental work for a year or so, chairside work. And it came out, the biggie was lower back and neck. And, you know, I described the anatomy from the toes on up. So some people have things in their fingers, some have it in their neck or head. And so at any rate, we recapitulated this course, sort of a shorter version, with a little clinical thing in the sim clinic with Shelley. By the way, let me tell you, this is Shelley Fywell. She's the director of our EFTA program, which I started in the early 70s, training auxiliaries to do things that dentists do, like place fillings, to be what? More efficient. It improves the access to care. Okay, so the dentist concentrates on doing the surgical procedure, and the EFTAs, and there are male EFTAs, not too many, but there are male, essentially follow the dentist when the dentist leaves the operatory. The EFTA comes in and places the restoration, or takes the impression, or what have you. It's very powerful from the standpoint of being, what, productive. You know, keeping the overhead down and being enormously productive. Enormous. So I started that back in the 70s and lobbied in the state of Ohio to get the law passed to allow for it. And it's existed ever since. As a matter of fact, third-year students can be EFTAs. It's usually at the semester point. If they had a job on a Saturday or something, they can function as an EFTA, placing restorations and so forth. Yes, sir.
So the third-year students, like, get licensed at EFTAs, or?
Licensure isn't a function of EFTAs right now. Registration is. But third-year students, they have to take the exam, but they will be registered by the state to do that. So you can imagine we have a lot of foreign-trained dentists that go through this. They, dentists in their own country, and they come to this country, don't have very much money, can't go to dental school, and so they become EFTAs. In fact, I met one in Little Italy, works at the trattoria there, Little Italy. Some may know that is. And he's from Albania. He's a dentist in Albania. And he wants to do dentistry. He's pretty much a busboy there, sort of a real come down. So we're going to get with him and see if he wants to be an EFTA. It's a good starting point. A lot of lefties become dentists. So here's what we're going to talk about. I look at this course as somewhat preventive, hopefully preventing problems in the future. I've practiced 50 years. I don't have any back problems. I've got a little flu cold and I took a flu shot. At least I don't have any back problem or neck problem. I think the damn phones are gonna cause us neck problems because we're always looking down like this. You'll know your C1 and C2 will start bothering you. So we're gonna start off about an overview. That's what I think I'm doing now, overview of ergonomics. Some of the basic principles of ergonomics, which I gotta tell you, they're gonna be hard for you to practice because you don't have a dental assistant. And that the selection of functionally designed dental equipment, when we had the grant in the 60s, there were a group of us, I'm a former public health service officer, that got together and developed criteria for the selection of dental equipment. The dental equipment was horrible, pre-60 and even during the 60s. Second lecture, Brianna is going to join us and talk to you about posture. She's a physiotherapist. She works with the medical students, and I don't know how I got in touch with her. I was looking for a physiotherapist. My granddaughter is a physiotherapist. She works in Brooklyn. So she's going to come and tell you what you should do, what exercises you should do. Because you're going to go home and, you know, some nights and your back is going to kill you. I've had students come up to me during the years we had the course and say, I think I'm having a heart attack. There was a lot of chest muscle pain, and you know, they weren't having a heart attack, it was just that they were sitting wrong. Okay. And then a little bit about aspiration and retraction. And delivery of materials. And then we're going to have mannequin practice up in the sim lab. Maybe if you're having problems. The perennial problem, by the way, is getting used to the mirror. You know, because if you don't have a mirror, what are you doing? You're going like this. You know, that violates the definition of posture. And when that becomes the norm, forget it. It's all over. You're going to have back problems. So, with that, I'm going to have Shelley talk to you about the clinical things. You want to, Shelley? By the way, this other young lady here who's signing is glad to sign, and she's my staff person.
How are you?
We're next to the dean's office. Okay, Shelley?
So just to expand a little bit on what Dr. Occhionero pointed out about the mannequin practice, nothing crazy. We're not going to have you take hand pieces out and start cutting preps, that sort of thing. But at least to give you some idea of whether or not you're understanding the principles of what we're going to tell you. Putting it into practice makes it happen better and cements it in your brain. Obviously, doing is better learning. So nothing crazy. What we're most likely going to do is just have you simulate exploration on a tooth that we choose and go around and look to see, are you sitting properly? Do all of you have loops?
No.
Do some of you not? Who doesn't have loops yet? Okay. Oh, a fair amount of you. Interesting. So for those of you that don't have loops, you're going to need to be sitting a certain way. And there's a correct way for both, wearing loops or not wearing loops, but wearing loops, you're going to be sitting better. More about that later. But our intention is to at least give you some feedback, and hopefully it'll stay in your mind to give you some muscle memory. And as you move forward through the years, especially when you really start working on patients, it'll stick with you, because like Dr. Occhionero said, it's really the bane of every dentist is to have all this neck and back problems because of getting into bad habits, like right now, this year, your very first year. If you are not taught how to think about this properly, you're not going to put it into action properly. So our intention is to at least give you the information, give you a little bit of that exercise, and hopefully it'll keep you in check in the future.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, and so our intention is, because there are 73 of you, that we're gonna break you into groups. So as we get a little bit closer to the date, we will have posted on Canvas. We're just gonna divide you up into groups of 24, 24, and 25, based on the alphabet. So we'll post that on Canvas. On the 22nd, the first hour in the sim clinic will be a lecture. And then the second hour will be 24 students. The first 24 in the alphabet will stay in the sim clinic, and we'll be able to better take care of smaller groups of you. Make sense? Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. So you shouldn't be intimidated by that clinical exercise. We're going to give you feedback. We're not, it's something that's mandatory. So, you know, whatever you do will be recorded, whatever maximum points we give for that. So don't worry about that. Sort of like prevention, sort of like floss for your back, if you will. Okay, so how about we get to the slide part?
And then, I think, would you like me to explain this? So that, I don't think that you're familiar with our format here. Yeah, one other thing, I want to familiarize you with the paper that we handed out. Basically, every week you'll have the same piece of paper with the schedule on the front. On the back, there are just questions that are also incorporated in the slides. If during the lecture you want to follow along up here, you can. The slides are also posted on Canvas. They have been since this morning. So if you want to follow along on the laptop, that's fine as well. On the front, there's also a place for you to write your name. This serves as an attendance sheet, so that when you're here, we collect these at the end of the lecture. We'll just have you put these up on the desk. There are some questions. What important information did you learn? What questions do you have about today's session? And if you leave a question, one of us certainly will answer the question and get back to you via Canvas. What we normally do is post all of the questions that anyone asks, and then we write the answer and then put it in a blog format on Canvas.
It's an anonymous form.
You'll see it there posted.
Questions that you can answer. Okay, so we'll get started with the lecture part. We're going to see where we go. So, as I said before, ergonomics is essentially the definition of ergonomics is people in relation to their work environment. And we talked a little bit about anatomy. We'll hear a lot more about anatomy. So all these things are involved. Engineering, of course, is involved in the selection criteria for equipment. Why is it that way? You know, why is the equipment that way? What are the criteria so that when you go to a convention, just looking at the equipment is not good. You actually got to sit down in it as a patient and also as the primary operator. Design comes involved with workflow in the office, more of an efficiency thing. And management is really related to the auxiliary personnel that you might hire. Are you going to practice four-handed dentistry? if you are, the design of your office will be different. So, talked to Dr. Landers about this. We had a little discussion about dentists that had to give up practice because they blew out a few back discs and pain so bad that they just had to give it up. They couldn't turn it around. So it's a good place to start from the standpoint of prevention. So these are the instructional objectives that are stated in the syllabus, I believe, as well as the PowerPoint. So we're going to look at the basic concepts of auxiliary utilization, classification of motion at chairside when you're working with a auxiliary, zones of activity, zones around a chair. You'll see a chair and like a clock face is placed on the chair. So what goes on in operating zone of 11 to 2 o'clock, sort of around the back of the chair. Various type of delivery systems, delivery system, our current units in the clinic are over the patient delivery system, where the tray is close to the dominant hand of the individual. And by the way, this is written primarily for right-handed operators. You just use the reverse for lefties. How many lefties are in? Okay. So I guess you have to make up your mind what side of the chair you're going to wear. If you're ambidextrous, it's, either way. So, but the chairs, by the way, I purchased the chairs when I was dean of clinics. Those particular chairs can go either way, so they can be moved around. The light fixtures can be moved on the other side. This is a selection criteria. I put that in there so that, when you go to a convention, you want to see if the chair goes low enough. A lot of times the chair doesn't go low enough. And that dimension from the floor up to the base of the chair is 14 inches. Well, if it only goes down 18 inches from the floor, you'll be sitting at chairside with your arms up like this, working that way. That's not a good way to work. You'll develop rotator cuff problems if you do that. So the criteria do become important. And then the arrangement of equipment in the operatory, and of course maintenance, which is really the maintenance or the function of a dental auxiliary. So those are things that I hope we touch on. So a variety of definitions, we touched on this. Individuals getting involved with their work environment with those criteria that we mentioned around the initial slide, physiology, anatomy, design, etc. Posture, I use a definition of a physiologist. Physiologist by the name of Winter, and he said that posture is the superimposition of body parts, head, thorax, abdomen, pelvic area, upper legs, lower legs, superimposition of body parts so that the massive weight of each one of those parts falls through a gravital line that goes through the base of the center of support. Okay? So you change that if you're working like this. Okay? All the back muscles are contracting to keep you in that position. That's where you get the back problem. And you'll see a lot of people practicing that way. I used to take pictures of students. I don't think you can do that anymore without the, but you know, sort of sneak up behind of how they're sitting. I've done that with auxiliaries, or Shelley has for me. So we'll look at some aberrations of posture. So again, superimposition of body parts, so the mass of weight falls through a gravital line that goes through the base of center of support. So when you're standing, the base of center of support is your feet. So I'm not saying you shouldn't stand in practice. There are a lot of people that do. I probably am 90-10, 90s seated, 10 standing, just to do something different, you know, just so that you don't throw a clot. Which you can do, you know, people that are on blood thinners especially, if they go on long trips, air trips or driving trips, you can throw a clot from your leg into your lung or worse. So you got to keep mobile, okay, somehow. So stress, we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's defined as pressure, uncertainty, change. Well, pressure may come from the way you're sitting, the way you're standing, the way you're accommodating to a situation, treating the patient. When the accommodation becomes a norm, then you're in trouble. That's when you're in trouble. You know? The only way, doc, I can see 14 is I gotta lean over. Well, no, that's not true. You can take advantage of the mobility of your surroundings and move the patient's head over to the right if you're working on 14 with a mirror, or even without. You know, if I wanted to prepare the buckle of 14 for class 5, or want to do my buckle cuts for a crown, I rotate the patient's head to the right, okay? And my vision can be almost direct. And then put the saliva ejector in the left, in the right cheek, because the water will pool here, or the saliva will pool here. You know, keeping the patient's head right, straight, rigid, is wrong. And actually the equipment was built that way originally. You'll see some older chairs where they have a cup headrest, the two little pads that go on the back of your head, rather than the pillow back headrest, where you can rotate the patient's head. So that has to do with, you know, taking advantage of the mobility of your surroundings and to move the patient's head to your best advantage. I mean, who's going to be doing the work 6-7 hours a day? You, not the patient. So you better protect yourself. Fatigue, you may know what that is about if you're taking biochem. It's the buildup of lactic acid in the muscles, wherever they are. So sitting like this, the lactic acid is building up, and I will get pain right here, right in the center of the neck, if I had pain in the neck. So, again, the gold standard is the posture. You could stand up at your side, very fine, or you could sit down at your side. Now, some people just cannot, for some reason, sit down. Well, get over it. You know, sit down. You're not supposed to get your exercise in the dental office. You know, there's other places for that. Supine is, medically it's called the Trendelenburg position. It's sort of sitting and laying down at the same time. And you could put the patient in the full supine position very easily. Some dentists would say, well, I've always had my patients sitting up. Well, you just tell them this is a better way for them. It's more comfortable, it's more relaxing, and you can get the work done much more readily. When you put them in a supine position, obviously, your vision in many more situations can be direct. You know, it doesn't always have to be indirect. But every chance you have when you're working on a tooth, especially the little guys with the sealants, use the mirror, use your glasses and use the mirror. That becomes second nature to you. Reminds me of a patient that I had when I was in the public health service. I was stationed in New Orleans, not a bad duty station, because I division of public health, of hospital service, and I had this rather large patient who had superfluous tissue on the palate, and we were going to make a denture. Well, I needed to get rid of some of that tissue. It was redundant tissue. There was bone underneath, but it was redundant tissue. So I scheduled this person for surgery, and I had the medical officer in charge help me with the aspiration and retraction. Well, he couldn't get over it. He said, how could you do that? You know, I'm looking at, it's upside down and backwards in the mirror. How could you do that? I said, it's what we do. You know, so he said, I could never do it. I said, you could do it, you just have to do it a lot. But they don't operate that way. Generally, they operate with direct vision. So, and delivery systems, well, there are three or four different types of delivery systems. From the standpoint of equipment, we're going to talk about a delivery system where instrumentation is placed. Over the patient is what you have. I think when you're in the sealant environment, they may use a Mayo stand. I don't know if they've ever attached a tray to that chair. I haven't seen the new versions of that. But in the main, when you're in the clinic here and in the new building, you'll have over patient delivery system. Now, there's a delivery system that's behind the patient. Well, for a general practitioner, that's not a good place. Oral surgeons like it because they have their instrumentation of brutality behind the patient. It's not really good. So the patient doesn't get upset with what's going on back there. So that's one delivery system when we talk about instrumentation. There are practice delivery systems, which we'll talk about when we talk about patient management, like HMOs or direct reimbursement. They relate to insurance delivery systems, Medicaid. Okay. And the third type of delivery system is related to equipment, but it's related to tray systems, preset sterilizable trays, cassettes, that type of instrumentation, and designed so it's efficient. And 4- and 6-handed dentistry, we'll talk a little bit about that. Primarily 4-handed dentistry we'll talk about. So just some definitions to be familiar with. I'm talking about fatigue, I'm talking about buildup of lactic acid, posture, Winter's definition, physiologist Winter, and supine generally put the patients always in the supine position. I do. So let's look at the basic concepts of auxiliary utilization. The first one, of course, is the rationale for the selection criteria of equipment. It's nice to know what the criteria are. The most important part is why. Why? I told you about the 14 inches off the floor of the patient's chair. If you're a tall operator, you're going to have a hard time sitting at chairside at 14 inches. Okay, you're going to want it higher, because where should the patient's head be? Anybody have an idea? Someone tell me.
At elbow level?
Yeah,
Maybe?
right. In the mid-sagittal plane, very good. Mid-sagittal plane at elbow height. Okay. So one of the criteria would be, well, this chair doesn't allow me to get close enough to do that. You know, how am I going to accommodate that? Well, you don't buy that chair. That's how you accommodate it. Look for another chair. But a lot of chairs are very wide at the back end for the patient comfort. But hey, wait a minute. I'm the dentist. I'm doing this 7-8 hours a day. You know, and dentistry is physically taxing. So, and you can see this is a delivery system that I was talking about. It's a mobile cart. You can see where the patient's mouth is. Mid-sagittal plane at about elbow height. Your elbows may be raised a little bit. Back straight, back straight. Notice she sits higher. She sits about 6 inches higher than the doctor. I should say, this person is 6 inches higher than this person. So in their criteria for seating, and you try to maintain that. Aspiration and retraction. Now, I've got to apologize. If you can't see the gloves on these people, that's your problem. We practiced for so many years without gloves, and we never killed anybody, to my knowledge. Not that I'm saying that you shouldn't wear gloves. You should always wear gloves. But unfortunately, in the 60s, we weren't wearing gloves, 60s and 70s. So this is four-handed dentistry in action. This person here is aspirating. The doctor is using finger rests, preparing maybe 4 or 5. And this job here, this guy is, well, that's the handpiece. Okay. This person should be debriding, the dental assistant should be debriding the area. These are preset tray systems. There was a notion we developed in the 70s and wrote a couple articles about it. As a matter of fact, the equipment that we're getting for the new school can accommodate this system, and it separates the non-sterilizables from the sterilizables. Okay, so these are all things that one would sterilize. This happens to be a composite tray, and it's called a tub tray delivery system. Very efficient for training auxiliaries that come into the office. Otherwise, when you go into your mobile cabinet, you know, you might be looking for all the operative instruments, and then all the materials, some of which you get at the cave. But doing this, these trays are unitized trays. In other words, most of them are set up the same way. We developed what I call then the uni-tray system. And the uni-tray system was a basic setup that could use on about 80% of the procedure. The ones you couldn't use it on are the specialties, obviously, or surgery, endo, perio. So there's some rules about that. And then the things that you can't put in a sterilizer in the tub. So if you have a new auxiliary, it's very easy to say, you know, get me out a uni-tray tub, the amalgam tub, or the composite tub. So you have tubs for all the various specialties that you might do at your side, if you're going to be a general practitioner. So, and this is, again, four-handed dentistry, delivery of instrumentation at the mouth area. And the assistant is bringing the next instrument to be used, to be placed in the doctor's hands. And then consistent approach. Just about every procedure, we developed a listing of what happens first, second, third, fourth, so that the delivery was efficient as possible.
Dr. Murray,
Yes, ma'am.
you mind if I say something about that bottom slide?
Okay.
Yeah.
This
I
one?
think it's prudent because you're all first year students. Does anybody know what is not correct about this slide anymore? Hands up, who knows? Oh, a fair amount of you, yeah. Currently, that's not allowed anymore. That whoever is assisting the dentist would recap the needle. There are self-capping devices now, so it's one-handed to minimize potential of, risk of being punctured by the needle. So FYI, that doesn't occur anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we don't know if this individual is recapping or taking it off. So, but,
Wow, okay.
because, and I'll tell you why. Because this guy's hand, which is me, is blocking the patient's vision. You know,
True.
I've got my hand underneath her lip and blocking the patient's vision, because some may pass out if they see the needle. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, it's still good to know, to make sure we don't recap.
I'm sorry?
It's still important for us to know, so.
Yeah. So, okay. And this last one is patient scheduling. From the standpoint of productivity with one auxiliary, you can increase your production by about 60% versus operating alone. So you can imagine what you can do if you had an expanded video set and a couple of auxiliaries. So these are some of the disorders. Maybe we'll get the third-year class, and I haven't had an opportunity to count on what's going on with them. But usually, this is the biggie with a lot of studies. This is very typical of auxiliary personnel, primarily hygienists, because of pinching the instrument scaling. That's good. You know, in the pen motion and exerting a lot of pressure, carpal tunnel syndrome. I think I have a monograph from the Mayo Clinic about carpal tunnel that is very much more descriptive. But Brianna is going to talk about general musculoskeletal issues. Oh, that's it. Okay, so I think you've had enough. It's been 3 hours straight. Did you have 2 hours this morning? You want to take a little break? Yeah. About, let's take 10, come a little bit. 5 minutes.
Take the firm hold of the McDermott needle site. Will be a little bit of pain and then numbness will set in. I'll just give you a little shot here. And I'll be right with you.
Probably all the violations rolled up into one video. They're too high. The only thing I object to those type of films, because they make the dentist look sort of foolish, and a lot of them are that way. Okay, let's get back with it. Talk about classification of motion. There are 5 classes. So one is fingers only, of course, class 1, which would be something like examining a tooth, you know, using a mirror and explore and examining the tooth. fingers and wrists, where you are actually giving an injection. You know, you may be giving an injection, fingers and wrists. Fingers, wrist and elbow, taking something off the tray, removing something from the tray to be used. Now, when you're practicing four-handed dentistry, you should limit your movements to these three. Okay? Class 4, wrist, elbow, and shoulder actually means that you're probably getting up or something out of the drawer below. And class 5 is major bodily movements. So, but the important thing is try, when you're working at chairside with an auxiliary, and even without an auxiliary, try to limit your hand motions to class 1, 2, and 3. So it might mean resetting your instrument tray or your cassette up so you don't have to get up and down. That all takes a lot of time. And in truth is less efficient. Now we know that the clinics are less efficient, no question about it. In fact, we're in the process, Mrs. Fowell and myself are developing another dental assistant program so that we have auxiliaries that can help in the clinic. So we have that, get back to that rotation system. During those early years, when we had the grants, those grants were called DAU grants, Dental Auxiliary Utilization. And their primary objective was to train dental students to be more efficient at chairside. And I said, if you had a chairside assistant, you'd increase your productivity by 70% from baseline. So, you know, that means greater access to care, rather than working alone, like we do in our clinics now, primarily work alone. Some of the specialty areas have dental assistants, but they don't have one for each resident. So, okay, yes? Well, that's a question. So, looking at the zones of activity, this is the right-handed operator. The operator at chairside works from 8 to 12 in that zone. And depending on what area of the mouth you're working in, that's where you will sit or have your chair. And we'll get back to this again. The static zone is from 11 to 2. So for a general practitioner, it wouldn't be wise to put your handpiece, have your handpieces mounted behind the chair. You know, because if my chair is here, I don't have a chair, but if my chair is here and the instruments are behind the chair, high-speed instruments, then I'm always handing it to myself. Some have adopted the idea that, well, we could have the auxiliary hand you the handpiece. Yeah, but it's better that your handpieces and your instrumentation are closest to your dominant hand, whether right or left. So if you're on this side of the chair, that's why I said for those lefties, you could move the chair around. Because if I'm a left-handed operator, I'd be on this side, and I'd like the tray to be over the patient here. Essentially in the same place, but the elbows in the arm have to be switched a little bit. So what goes in the static position? Well, in the mobile tray, that's where the a mobile unit might be. You could put the amalgamator, or you could put your anesthetic syringes, you know, stored out of the way, but at the level where you may not want them on the tray because of, well, just the pure positioning of a needle might be frightening to the patient. You could put them in this, and we'll talk about the mobile cabinet, put them in a well. The assistant is usually at the 3 o'clock position. The tray is usually a mobile cart. The mobile cart is usually here. Actually, the mobile cart, the edge of a mobile cart, the edge of the cart should be on a line parallel to the patient's mouth. Okay, so between 2 and 3. This really isn't drawn to scale. So, but essentially the assistant's here, doc is here. So, just to give you an idea, the 8 o'clock position, I could be scaling the lower anterior tooth, the labial, of the lower anterior tooth. I could do the lingual by just moving a little bit back at the 9 o'clock with a mirror. Usually I would use a mirror to reflect light on the linguals and scale the linguals. Okay. Now, if I were preparing number 15 for a crown, I'd get it at the 11 o'clock. And what did I say I'd do with the head? Rotate the head to the right. Okay, so I could do my prep, the buccal prep, or even a buccal restoration, retracting the tissue with my finger. Don't use a mirror to retract, even with the little kids. Fingers are softer than mirrors. You know, after a while, those things hurt, especially if the mirror is in the oral cavity. So I would retract and do the preparation on the buccal. It was a class 5. Now, I wouldn't have to do that because I would have to do that if I kept the patient's head straight. If I put the patient's head right in the middle and rotated, I could just look right down on it. So, but as you move to the left side for right-handed operator, move to the left side, you go closer to 11 and 12. I've even operated at 12 when I'm looking for parallelism. You know, if you're doing a bridge prep. Of course, we have these rhodium plated mirrors that captures the whole upper arch to see if everything is parallel. So the two transfer zones here, this is where, this is the secondary transfer zone. This simulates the tray over the patient. But this is where instrument transfer really takes place at the oral cavity. That's where four-handed dentistry is practiced, okay? Right there. Zones of activity. So we talked a little bit about an operator. I have a chart of all the positions that you could pretty much possibly be in. And so if you're having trouble, you just look it up on the chart. It tells you essentially what relative, these are relative positions, what relative position you should be at, what you should do with the head, okay? Generally, the other things follow. Anytime you move the head left or right, put the saliva ejector in the most dependent portion of the mouth. So, for example, if I'm doing, say, 4 and 5 buccal composites, maybe 4, 5, and 6 buccal composite. I'm gonna rotate the patient's head a little bit to the left. Now I put the saliva detector in the left, whatever is lowest, dependent. And the auxiliary would aspirate. And I could prepare those with direct vision. So indirect vision, all the whole upper arch, I could use for occlusal preparation. See, because a patient's head is really back this far, you know, supine. The maxillary arch should be, and we'll say this a couple million times, the maxillary arch when the mouth is open should be parallel to the body, okay, to your body, okay? So, this is the upper arch, it would be like this. The mandibular teeth are usually parallel to the floor. So when the patient opens their mouth, I can look with direct vision on all the lower teeth and retract and prepare at will. And we'll go over that several times. You really have to do it. So that's what the simulation will look into. So those are the relative positions. So there are a wide range of positions for the doctor. So the primary zone delivery system is here, transfer, and this is the secondary. So we'll talk a little bit about this selection criteria. You can sit down for a while. By the way, chairs like this, secretarial chairs, chairs like this, are the way you should sit. Okay? So usually feet up flat on the floor, thighs parallel to the floor. And when we talk about chair position, we'll go over that again. Back against the backrest. A lot of dentists are like this. You know, that's absolutely wrong. The chair wasn't built that way. If you look at secretarial stools especially, the back is mobile, you go in and out, and raised higher and lower. Well, where does it feel most comfortable to you? Probably low back pain. So this chair meets the criteria. Matter of fact, when I first got in practice in New Orleans, they didn't have any chairs. So I stole the secretary's chair. It was perfect. You know, the ones that say dental on them, they're about $1,200, $1,500. Secretarial stool you can get at Home Depot or someplace for $90. You know, and they do the same thing, really. Okay. So the patient's chair should have a thin back, maximum 2 inches. Thickness measures 6 inches from the top. This is the top. And this is an ideally designed chair because you can get in there very close to the patient's head, have the head in the mid-sagittal plane. So, but they're talking about the thickness here of the chair, or the thinness. When you have cupped headrests, those cupped headrests get in the way of your legs. So when you put the patient in supine position, you got the headrest right on your thighs. That's not very comfortable. So, you know, when you go to a convention, that's why I say, sit down with the chair, try it out. Can I sit there and be comfortable with the chair? So the narrow back, of course, the rationale is that you can get close. The rationale for a thin back is so you can get your thighs underneath the chair. Provide a complete body support for the supine patient, including arm support. And these arms should be retractable so that the patient can get in and out of the chair easily. And usually both arms are for a left-handed and right-handed operator. So they're fairly comfortable, actually right from the 60s. But going to a couple of conventions, I've noticed that they're getting wider again. You know, like they're accommodating the shoulders. You know, if you have a big set of shoulders here, you might have a little bit of an overhang. And then have a low base, maximum 14 inches when used in its lowest position. And that's to accommodate short operators. You know, I would say 5'8" or less. Because otherwise, if it's 18 or 20 inches and you're sitting here the way you're supposed to, you're gonna be raising your arms like this to work. And what happens is that you wind up standing up. You know, well, that's not good. But, you know, look at the chairs and make it go down to its lowest level. And then, of course, you've got to accommodate auxiliaries, but I usually accommodate me first. Afterwards, you pay for those chairs. And you're going to have them a long time. Those damn chairs last forever. They just last forever. And they can even be refinished. You know, this part and this part can be refinished. As long as the mechanics are right, it's fine. Now this talks a little bit about arrangement of the patient's chair. Our chairs in the clinic, you'll note, you come in behind the patient. That's okay. It's nice to greet the patient face on rather than sneak up behind him. So I prefer this way, just the reverse of what you have. You'll see that this chair is in the operatory in a diagonal fashion. Well, the reason why that's done is that the operatory is not wide enough. And that's exactly what we have in the clinic. Those operatories are 10 by 7 on centers, you know, and they're too narrow. They're too narrow. So I can see when I walk through some students, you know, because one of the features of a dental chair is that you can rotate it. There's a button on the side that allows you to rotate it. Yeah.
You know if there's more room in the new space?
In the new school,
Yes, sir.
they're 9 by 9. It's better.
Okay.
It's better. They're 9 by 9. Actually, we had told them that we wanted 10 by 10, but you know, every square foot of space costs money. So we compromised on a foot, you know. So
Well, that's 11.
yeah, no, it's adequate. It's adequate. The cabinetry is adequate. When we designed the clinic down here, and I bought units for the clinic, I started the preceptor program in '67. I wanted every student to have their own chair for 2 years. Well, the problem is utilization of the chairs is about 50%, maybe 60 if you want to stretch it. So they vacated some of the chairs, and wasn't happy about that, because that might come back to haunt people. So this is why diagonal, then when you come into the room, you know, you see the patient right away. And they say 30, this has changed now to about 2 feet. If you need extra room from the wall to the tip of the chair. You don't need 36 inches. So 24 inches. So, but this provides more workspace. You want, with the other way, with a chair the other way, the sinks are here. You better make sure patients can see you washing your hands. 'Cause we've had that complaint on a couple of situations with students and patients. Make sure you wash your hands. And don't use the same gloves all day long. We think that's a silly thing, but I had a preceptor, let's say about 15 years ago, and he wore the same damn gloves all day long. I don't know, his hands must look like prunes. He just wouldn't take them off. And I told him, I said, you know, that's a violation of infection control. Well, I don't put my hands in the mouth. I said, but your preceptor is supposed to know what to do. So, at any rate, he's gone now. Long gone. So that's probably all I want to say about positioning at this point. But, you know, if you get trapped for room here, well, you won't be here. Well, you may be doing papers. So to gain more room, just hit the lever on the base of the chair. You release that lever, and the chair will rotate. Then lock it again, because if you lean up against the chair, it'll move away from you. So there are adjustments to the chair. Well, I talked about rotation, obviously elevation, if you're going to stand, tilting of the seat and lowering of the patient's backrest. So usually you have, when the patient comes into the room, usually have the chair back upright, let them sit and then swing around. And usually what especially with a patient that I had not worked four-handed dentistry, I would say, Ms. Smith, I'm going to put your chair back a bit. You know, and I'll put my hand on their shoulder and then rotate the chair back to the supine position. And there are controls for all those things, usually on the rheostat. The rheostat, by the way, well, we're not talking about the unit. The rheostat is better if it's a satellite rheostat, one where you put your foot on it any place and it goes on. The ones that are pedal, sometimes they're hard to find, and then if they don't have a good grip on the floor, they'll move. So with your foot putting on the satellite, it holds it in place. So this is the assistant stool. Should have a broad stable base with at least 5 casters. And the reason that is true is because the assistant sits higher. The assistant will then have their feet on this ring, whereas when you sit down as an operator, you'll have your feet on the floor. Now, I think when you're working in the ceiling program, both you and your assistant counterpart will have your feet on the floor. You know, these chairs are fairly costly. So have a large adequately padded seat. Some have saddles, some people don't like the saddle seat, you know, a contoured seat. Have a maximum height of 27 inches off the floor to the base. Okay. Be height adjustable by foot pressure or pneumatic pressure. You used to have to pull out a bolt on the side and lift it by hand, but most all chairs are pneumatic now. Just press the side and you go up. Have a front and side body support, adjustable horizontally and vertically. So this is just the opposite of the doctor's chair. For a dental assistant, if I'm a dental assistant and the patient's here, that body support comes around like this, and it goes on the rib cage, so the auxiliary can lean into the field of operation. That's why this has to be heavy duty, because otherwise the chair would slip out from under it. Okay, so this is called the body support. One of our staff people, who's very active in purchasing the chairs, told me that's a back support. That is not a back support. You know, first place, he wasn't a dentist, and I said that is a body support. He designed that years ago to protect the auxiliary from falling into the field of operation inadvertently. So that's the auxiliaries, really. So it's good to know why, again, he's told you why. Why here, because the doctor's stool maximum height is usually 21 inches, and a large padded seat, and a stable base. Okay, this is pretty obvious where the assistant is, the stool is going to be. It's usually close up to the mobile cabinet. This shows the doctor's stool. This is the saddle seat. It doesn't show the back. I would never buy a stool like this. I mean, it looks like it was taken off a quarter horse, you know, because it's not comfortable. You know, you've got to have positive back support. And every once in a while, even after X number of years of practice, I'd find myself this way, not against the back support. Why am I doing that? Well, I might be tense about the procedure I'm doing, you know, sitting on the edge. So, broad stable base, padded seat, minimum height of 14 inches, so it wouldn't be a maximum. The maximum is 21 inches. So if you're a taller operator, obviously, like this gentleman over here, you're gonna have the seat up higher, you know, to maintain this configuration. Otherwise, you know, your legs are like that. And a lot of people don't like this saddle seat because it cuts off the circulation behind the knee and your feet go numb. You know, so that's not good. Just like in the video. And a positive back support, which I don't even know why I put that picture in. Probably to remind me to tell you, don't ever get that. Actually, when we moved into this building, there was a dentist that was in charge, and he did a fantastic building, design of this building. Because, you know, we came into it in '67. That was when the preceptor program started. And it's held up fairly well. It's not certainly state of the art, but the other place will be. The other place will be. So, positive X. And the operator's stool, you know, it's gonna travel between 8 and 11. Use the mobility of the stool to get around. And yet, like I said, you don't have to sit down all day. Sometimes I'll stand up just to alter my configuration. And you might get tired sitting down all day. And some people say, well, to extract teeth, I've got to stand up. To get leverage, I try to understand that. In fact, there's an MD in Cleveland that does carpal tunnel. I had 3 auxiliaries that had carpal tunnel syndrome. 2 hygienists and 1 after who had it done in both hands. And he did all his surgery sitting down. You know, almost similar to what we do. So, and you know, if you think about it, when I talk about positioning of the maxillary arch, and had a patient, you can almost see the 3rd molar. If their maxillary arch is perpendicular to you, or parallel to you, you can see direct vision on upper molars, upper 3rd molars that generally, if they're not horizontally impacted, generally very easy to roll out of there. Okay, this is the mobile cabinet. We have them. This came about our deliberations. And there will be mobile cabinets in the new facility. But the range of height of a mobile cabinet is interesting. For sit-down dentistry, it should be 31 inches. So probably the height of that table. Okay, so that you could work from the table. But they range from 31 to 35. 35 is definitely for stand-up dentistry. So if you design your office for sit-down, don't get a 35 molar cabinet. And 33, which is in our clinic, is neither for stand-up or sit-down. And I told the faculty member that was putting it together, I said, 33 is wrong. You know, it's too low for stand-up and too high for sit-down. So 31 is better, best. So it should be local. Source of limited supply of restorative or impression materials in this well. You'll see other pictures of it. There's a well underneath it. This slides back and forth, either east and west, or they make them north and south, whichever you decide. But provide a work surface over the assistant's lab. Well, if they go east and west, then you really need a wider aperture, because you then have the cabinetry and the slide top. So I prefer the ones that just slide out over the lap. Provide a work surface over the assistant's lap. Be of a height comfortable for sit-down assistant. Ideal height varies with the height of the operator. Average cabinet is 31 and a half. Be of a depth adequate to avoid tipping and for allowing the assistant to get things out of the drawers without reaching or leaning. And then have a waste receptacle on the side. So we'll have those over there. You certainly won't have them when you're doing the seal. But in our clinics, all students have them at 33 and a half, 33 inches. Well, this is what the configuration looks like. Now this has a sliding top that goes over the lap. See the chairs getting very close to the patient's position. We're gonna stop there. Are there any questions? Any answers? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned you had a manual or like a sheet that suggested positions. So we start rotating these on Friday. Are you able to go to that? So we have some sort of guidance?
We're gonna put it on.
Yeah, we can put it
Yeah,
on.
it'll be on, camera. So, these slides are on. No, anything I have, you know, the card is over. I'll put the Mayo Clinic one on. Carpal tunnel. But there are other